The 14th year of Chenghua. Arc 4, Into the Ministry of Justice. Chapter 42. A Temper. Leaving his reservations aside, Wang Zhi ended up agreeing on the bet. After that, Tang Fan left the Western Depot. Noticing that the time was just right, he then headed home. Due to the recent East Palace case, he had been running between the palace and the Western Depot, or even sometimes the Han family residence. He couldn't go to work as he normally did in Shuntian Prefecture, but Master Pan was happy to let him have a temporary leave so that he didn't need to report to the bureau until the conclusion of the investigation of the East Palace case. Either way, both entailed that he had to investigate, but having to go to the bureau on time every day versus being free to go to work whenever were two totally different concepts. Even though he wasn't the type of official to just muddle through life, he was quite happy to be given the chance to indulge in some laziness every once in a while. Since the case had come to an end, this carefree life was also about to come to an end as well. It was hard for him not to feel a bit depressed. He didn't make a special detour for that familiar stall to eat wontons, but instead went straight home. It would undoubtedly be best if Dong was at home cooking today. He definitely didn't want a repeat of last time when he ate no mai chi on an empty stomach that resulted in him suffering from stomachache. The sky gradually darkened. When he was still some distance away from home, he could vaguely see billowing stove smoke coming off in the direction of their kitchen. All of a sudden, it was like he could even smell the aroma of food, which made his mood a lot better. He hummed a little tune as his gait got brisker. No matter where you go, home is still best. The courtyard door wasn't locked, only half closed. Right as he came in, he heard a burst of talking and laughter coming from inside. There seemed to be a familiar male voice vaguely mixed in with it. Sui Zhou was back. Tang Fan was startled at first, then a smile emerged on his face afterwards. Before he had time to take a few steps inward, however, he noticed that the door connecting the main hall to the dining hall was wide opened, a feast of piping hot food arranged inside. Young Dong was currently walking out of the kitchen with a plate she had just made up, calling out as she went. "Brother Sui, Sister Zhou, the food's all ready. Gag's definitely not going to be back to eat again, so let's just eat now." A man and a woman stood beside the table in the hall. The man was, of course, Sui Zhou, whom he had not seen for many days. He appeared to be a bit thinner but also even more sharp, presumably only having been back for a short time. He wasn't wearing that intimidating Jinyue uniform but casual robes. It made him even more comparable to a prized sword yet to be unsheathed, a blood-satiated sword light bundled beneath those ordinary garments. Someone like this simply didn't need to dress themselves in fancy robes, nor protect themselves with a sharp blade. Just by standing there, he was somebody one would be unable to ignore. The woman was that Zhou cousin Tang Fan had met the other day, who had come looking for Sui Zhou to no avail. She happened to run into him today, though. He wasn't sure what she said, but Sui Zhou's stern face noticeably smiled a bit. Her laughter spread far and wide, like silver bells. The distance between them was not too near, nor too far. It was just as proper decorum dictated. Their arms looked like they were close but also like they weren't touching at all. In Tang Fan's eyes, it was an ambiguity which was both substantial and also not. Dong bounced into the hall with the food, then said something to the woman. They laughed together as if they were close. "How long have you two known each other, huh? You've stuck together like glue immediately. You're more affectionate to her than me, your own big brother," he thought to himself. He would never admit that he was a little sour. The angle where he stood happened to be blocked by a tree and the day has turned to dusk. No one would be able to discover him there for some time. Seeing the three of them take their individual seats, as if they really were about to eat without waiting for him, he didn't advance further. Instead, he unconsciously turned, quietly drawing back. Whenever the blanket of night descended, infinite households would light their lanterns in time for evening reunions. He was normally not a melancholic, overly sensitive sort, but for some reason today, when he saw the scene of those three talking and laughing over a meal, he felt that he would be out of place there. Like they were a family, and him bursting in right then would have disturbed them. The most loathsome one was Dong. Girls that grew up wouldn't stay inside, This one wasn't yet grown, but she was already itching to go cozy up to strangers. Tang Fan mumbled to himself, unaware that he was quoting the wrong idiom. He took a stroll around Suizhou's home with his hands behind his back like an old man. It wasn't long before he wound around to the inner gate of the rear courtyard. Smelling the wafts of food coming from inside, he rubbed his stomach and felt even hungrier. He pondered on whether he should go out to find food before coming back, but he had been scrambling all over the place too much lately. Even if he had taken sedan chairs at times, he inevitably couldn't keep up with those that needed to travel on the daily. His legs went tremendously sore and weak the second he relaxed, making him too lazy to move. He simply sat on the sill of the back door, blankly gazing at the stars that filled the sky. Early autumn had now approached, making it chilly after nightfall. Not long after, he sneezed as fatigue overcame him. He leaned his head against the door frame, then unwittingly fell asleep like that. After some unknown amount of time later, he opened his eyes feeling like he had become a bit heavier. It was completely dark out, but illumination coming from inside the building allowed him to see the one before him. "Guangchuan," he said groggily. Catching sight of who was next to him, he said, "Dong, why are you two here?" Only then did he realize that heavier weight he felt from himself came from a cloak the Suizhou had covered him with. Dong put her hands on her hips and chirped at him. "Care to explain, Gig? We waited and waited, yet you didn't come back. We were worried to death. Brother Sui was even going to go out and look for you, but you were just hiding away here. Why didn't you come inside?" Since he had just woken up, Tang Fan's eyes were empty and face blank, still in a state of half-consciousness. Seeing that Dong wanted to say something more, Suizhou stopped her, then helped Tang Fan up. The latter's legs had gone numb from sitting for so long. His expression twisting up, he nearly fell forward, but thankfully, Suizhou had sharp eyes and quick hands, holding him up by the waist. "Can you walk?" His brows were creased, heavily hinting that if he couldn't walk, he was going to carry him. For the sake of his manly dignity, Master Tang quickly answered, "I'm fine, I've just been sitting for too long. I'll be okay once I've stood for a while." "Why didn't you go inside?" the other asked, repeating what Dong had just asked. Tang Fan inexplicably felt a bit guilty. Touching his nose, he replied, "I was kind of tired when I had just gotten back, so I thought to sit here for a second. I didn't expect to accidentally fall asleep." As soon as he said it, he felt his own justification to be pretty poor. Who was Suizhou? A Chenghua officer proficient in interrogation, that was who. Couldn't he tell when Tang Fan was lying and when he was telling the truth? Beneath the other's silent stare, Tang Fan felt even guiltier. Suizhou watched him for a good while. "Let's go back," he eventually said. "Go cook some ginger soup, Dong." She agreed, then turned and sped away. Nobody would ever reject the warmth of being looked after, and Tang Fan was no exception. The minor bit of complaints he just had dissipated, and he beamed as he watched Dong jog all the way to the kitchen. He felt that ever since he had acknowledged this little sister of his quality of life had risen. Sighing over his own good fortune, he turned his head to see that Suizhou was staring at him. "What are you looking at me for?" he had to wonder. "You're thin," the other concluded, after peering at him for a long time. "No, I'm not." Tang Fan felt his own cheek but detected nothing wrong. "You are." Suizhou appeared to have both asked himself and answered himself, drawing his own conclusion into a footnote. "When I wasn't at home, how did you and Dong eat?" Tang Fan smiled. "What do you mean, how did I eat? I haven't fallen behind on 3 square meals a day." It's just that I've been busy investigating all this time, so occasionally having to skip one was unavoidable. And Dong. The little girl was just walking in with a bowl of steaming ginger soup. Tang Fan half lamented, half teased her. She's passed her days by far more comfortably than I have. Sometimes, she would go to your family to play with your sister, staying for both dinner and the night. Other times, she'd even go to the neighbors to eat. A life like that sure has saved food for this house. Dong stuck out her tongue, pouting as she retorted. Who told you to never be home, Gig? I leave food for you but you don't eat it? It just goes to waste. Cutting off her complaint, Suizhou asked him, You haven't eaten dinner yet, right? Tang Fan coughed awkwardly, not answering. Seeing as he was admitting nothing and saying nothing, Suizhou simply got up and left. The second he did, Tang Fan pulled at Dong. Who offended him? Why does he look like someone owes him 800 strings of coins? She curled her lip. What do you mean, who? You're the one that owes him. He rolled his eyes. Try and lie to me less. What does that have to do with me? Why would it not have anything to do with you? We had made the food and were all waiting for you but you didn't come back. Brother Sui just told me and Sister Jo to start eating, even though he never moved his own chopsticks. You tell me, should he look happy when he hasn't eaten yet? Tang Fan was caught off guard. He didn't eat, either. He had clearly seen them already seated and about to eat. Dong giggled. How could he? He's pretty loyal. Since he was waiting for you, he stubbornly looked at a table full of food but not move a bit. There was even honey-roasted leg of lamb and egg foo rong that he made himself. When he told us to go ahead and eat, Sister Jo was being polite but I couldn't hold back because I was drooling. I just had to use my chopsticks. Poor Master Tang's belly was empty, his expression that of longing upon hearing this. He, too, started drooling from her vivid and realistic descriptions. Oh, had he known, he would have gone in earlier. Dignity. What dignity? Tang Runking, Tang Runking, you can't eat dignity. He went and pinched her on the cheek. You really don't adhere to sibling code, little girl. Don't tell me you didn't leave me any. The leg of lamb won't taste as good once it had gone cold, she cried out in injustice. Hey, you weren't kidding, too. Brother Sui's skill is pretty great. The lamb had been roasted golden and was still dripping with oil on top. When it was almost done, he brushed a layer of honey glaze onto it, then baked it further until it smelled of char. When I ate it, it was still steaming, and I don't even need to bring up how tender it was. I was thinking to myself, it's too bad that Gig can't eat any of this tasty food. Oh well. I had to help you by eating more of it, so I ate 4 whole slices in a row. I got a full belly. The foo rong was also really delicious, but I couldn't eat any more. Ai. The sorrow in his heart had long been overflowing. Stop talking. Plus, Sister Jo cooked a couple of dishes but I thought they were so-so. I only took a bite of them and then didn't touch them again. I noticed that she didn't eat much of them, either. Big brother, I'm going to tell you a secret. I think she likes Brother Sui in the same way that Xiaoji liked you before. When we were eating, she kept sneaking glances at him but he acted like he saw nothing. It was so funny. She was like a little mother hen, talking as she grinned, clucking and even striking out gestures. One wave of her little arm nearly gave him a black eye. Unamused, he poked her, indicating that she should stop while she was ahead. The small girl was sadly unable to grasp what he was trying to tell her, continuing to gossip about Suizhou and his cousin. Also I heard her ask him, cousin, do you still remember the agreement between our families when we were young? She imitated the expression Miss Jo had then, skewing her eyes in her best impression of a bashful look. He almost failed to hold his laughter in. He continued to watch her put on a show, but following the doctrine of sibling compassion, he kindly warned her. "Ah Dong. What is it?" she answered impatiently. "You're not listening carefully at all. Someone here is in the middle of explaining important stuff." Tang Fan took her chin and turned her head around, motioning for her to look behind herself. She saw Suizhou standing there and staring at her expressionlessly. It was unclear how much he had heard. "Ah Dong." Suizhou. "Ah Dong," proceeded to feign forgetfulness. He shot her a placid look and said, "Go see to the firewood. There's congee cooking on the stove." As if she had been granted amnesty, she slipped away from him like she was in flight, scrambling towards the kitchen. His gaze fell upon Tang Fan again. The other blinked, showing a pure and innocent expression of "I have absolutely no idea what she was talking about just now." "The ginger soup is growing cold," Suizhou casually said. Tang Fan owed and quickly lowered his head to drink it. The room descended into some kind of an awkward atmosphere. Luckily, Master Tang was quick-witted and smart, immediately thinking up a subject that could divert the others' attention. "How was the case you were sent to handle?" Suizhou pulled a chair over and sat. "We went to Jiangxi to investigate Huang Jinglong, magistrate of the Jian prefecture." Tang Fan sat up straight, paying close attention. "What did he do?" The supervising censors of Jiangxi presented a memorial, claiming that in the 3 years since the 11th year of Chenghua, more than 300 prisoners have been tortured to death in Jian by him, but he was falsely claiming that they had died of illness, thereby covering it up. Tang Fan was horrified. "The gall of him!" Suizhou nodded. "Indeed. There was an order from the top for the Ministry of Justice and supervising censors to collaborate with the Jinyue to travel and investigate the matter locally, as well as arresting Huang Jinglong and taking him into the capital. That's why I left in a hurry." "How did it go?" "Well, it had been going well. The evidence was solid, and he couldn't refute it. The people he had tortured to death numbered 417. Apart from the 300 or so prisoners, there were a couple tens of others among them that were arrested but found not guilty of any crime. They were imprisoned, then secretly tortured to death. When we made an inventory of the bodies though, we found that around a dozen of them were missing. We asked him again but he couldn't tell us why that was." "Why not?" "Not sure. He just said that the number was wrong, but the 417 was the number based on the prison records as well as the reports made by the dead people's family members. Reasonably speaking, it isn't less and might even be more than that. Ever since Yingzong's time, court officials had to be palace honorates. It was the primary criteria. In other words, one had to pass the imperial exams to be qualified to serve as government official. Of course, that wasn't an absolute thing, as provincial honorates also had paths to take, and lucky individuals could even take a post that happened to be vacant. However, the highest position a provincial honorate could take was no higher than that of provincial coordinator. They would never be promoted to national government position nor the cabinet. That was why, in the Great Ming, everyone scrambled to pass the imperial exams and be one of its palace honorates. Anyhow, upon becoming an official after studying strenuously for years or even decades, everyone had different aspirations. Some wanted to serve the nation and some were after aiding the common folk. However, there were also those who were after getting more money and some who were covetous of power and wanted to climb even higher up in the world. These were all understandable. But, it was unheard of for a true fourth-rank prefectural magistrate who had taken great pains to get to his position and then mistreated convicts until he got reported, whereupon he would completely lose his standing. Really, what picture did that ultimately paint? Had Huang Jinglong studied himself to stupidity? Had he been driven mad? Develop a perversion that made him abuse prisoners to get a psychological high? Tang Fan felt it a bit unbelievable while comprehending why the case would need to involve the Jinyue. He didn't try to justify his motivation and aim. Suizhou shook his head. After he was arrested, he didn't say a word, refusing to disclose anything. After Huang Jinglong got brought back to the capital, the assignment was considered finished. Other people from other departments would come to do the follow-up and tie the loose ends. There was no need for Suizhou to show his face for any of it anymore. While they talked, Dong came in carrying a bowl. The aroma of it followed the light breeze made by the door opening to waft beneath Tang Fan's nose. His stomach, which was warmed by the ginger soup, immediately rumbled. "Smells good," he couldn't resist exclaiming. This congee was cooked by Brother Sui himself. "Of course it smells good." She slowly came over and settled the bowls down. It got minced meat, shiitake mushroom, celery, and chopped peanuts in it. "He can be a real great person, Gig. A real great person." After getting caught by Suizhou during her accurate imitation of his cousin Zhou, the girl was quick to want to make up for it. What a shame it was that she was too young to think up many fresh verses. All she could do was repeat "a real great person" a couple times over. Tang Fan skewed her a look. Without exposing her, he lowered his head, scooped up a spoonful of the scalding congee, then ate it after blowing on it. The rice had been boiled soft by the fire, the scent of meat suffusing his mouth. The presence of the shiitake mushroom and peanuts thus enhanced the flavor of the congee to another level. There was no need to chew much when eating it, as it was already a mouthful of silky goodness. In Master Tang's opinion, who had been starving for ages, this was the best for his digestion. He said nothing though, but instead dived his head straight in to meticulously eat it. Seeing him like so, Suizhou also picked up his spoon. Once they had eaten and pretty much emptied their bowls, their speed slowed. "Did a lot of things happen at the Shuntian prefecture in the meantime?" Suizhou asked. Recalling what the other had just said about him losing weight, Tang Fan shook his head. "Not at the Shuntian prefecture. He first sent Dong to bed, then recounted what happened to Suizhou. When it came to things that involved the palace, there was a lot that couldn't be mentioned. Despite his closeness to Suizhou, it would be bad to say too much. Knowing too much could be disastrous, too. He picked out a couple main points to speak of, but a considerable amount of information remained unsaid. There wasn't a need for him explain in much detail either. With how smart Suizhou was, he could guess at things. Listening until the end, Suizhou fell silent for a good while, as if in thought. "There's a lot of secrets not yet revealed in this," he said at last. "Wang Ji might not be hindered as a eunuch, but with your status, it's best for you to not get too deeply involved." His meaning was very clear. Wang Ji was a eunuch that the emperor and consort considered as one of their own, but Tang Fan was an outside official, and a low-ranking one at that. If he knew too much, it might make someone above unhappy and they might want to tidy him up. It would be easy for them to do so with just a casual wave of the hand. Tang Fan grinned. "Don't you worry. The murderer is already getting executed, so I won't have to care about anything else that happens. From here on out, I won't be getting caught up in eunuch Wang's affairs." Despite him being an intelligent man with far-reaching insights, he would never have foreseen that he would have countless occasions of interaction with eunuch Wang following this, nor that he would transform his political career that should have been as fleeting as a shooting star. He finished the congee and set the bowl aside. "Dong is already pretty good at cooking, but your work is even better than hers," he commended. "I'm like a moron that can't tell right from left in comparison." A faint smile appeared in Suizhou's eyes. "Since we're here, why would you need to do it?" "Right, if Dong marries off later and you also take a wife, then what'll I do?" The food lover Master Tang wasn't at all happy about his good friend's words, getting depressed upon hearing them instead. It was now late in the day. The two chatted for a little more. Then, they went back to their respective rooms to rest. Even with the ginger soup, Master Tang still caught a chill the next day. The illness rushed up acutely, soundly knocking him down. He laid upon the bed, coughing and sneezing. He also had a bit of a temperature, burning him thoroughly red with misty eyes. Giving something up had to be accompanied by receiving something else, that was a truth. There was no need to go to the bureau, nor to do any work. He could finally request sick leave with complete righteousness, so that he could stay at home. The illness itself was uncomfortable, but the treatment sick people got was obviously special. Someone would cook him food, then bring it straight to his mouth. He didn't even need to wash his own face, because someone would wring out a rag and help him with that, too. Master Tang still didn't feel lucky, though. As he now looked at the white congee and pickled vegetables in front him, he felt his taste buds quickly fading from his mouth. "Can you put something a little stronger in here? Even spiced beef or crystal meat would be fine," he entreated the one before him. Seeing Master Tang's miserable expression, Suizhou felt a bit like laughing, but his face was as cold and indifferent as ever when he answered, "No." Tang Fan sneezed, almost squeezing out tears. His eyes became hazy and his nose itched, making him look all the more pitiful. General Sui Beihu's heart really was made of iron. He remained unmoved at this, merely passing the congee over to him. "Will you eat it yourself, or do I have to feed you?" "I'll eat it, I'll eat it." Master Tang raised his white flag in surrender. What a joke. If word got out that he had been spoon-fed, his image of being wise and canny would be gone. However, as soon as he looked at that bland, tasteless congee alongside those abominably salty, pickled vegetables, he lost his appetite. Right then, his savior's star descended from the heavens. Dong opened the door and came in. "Gag, there's someone looking for you outside. He's really grand looking and says he's from the Western Depot." It was like Tang Fan had received reprieve from punishment. When he was about to put the bowl he held down, he got a cold glare from Suizhou, so he ashamedly lifted it back up. Suizhou had Dong keep an eye on Tang Fan to make sure he ate the congee, then got up and left himself. Right as he went out the door, he saw two people heading right on over. The one in front was wearing regular clothes and walked with his hands behind his back. One glance at that arrogant look on his face told that he was someone of great influence, where even Suizhou could recognize him. Their visitor was the recently famous director of the Western Depot, the one that inherited the majority of his predecessor Wang Zhen's reputation of being a powerful yet treacherous eunuch Wang Ji. Even though he had dropped by for a visit, eunuch Wang hadn't waited for the host to come greet him but came straight in. As if he had entered a no-man's land, he indeed looked quite imposing. While he was walking along, he let out a string of running commentaries. "There's too many flowers in this courtyard and they're planted messily, like someone didn't know how arrangements work. It's really garish to look at. So tacky." Suizhou cupped his hands. "I didn't know you would be coming, eunuch Wang. Please forgive me for not coming to greet you." He spoke to him just how he was when speaking to even the Empress Dowager, with a plain, dead-looking face. Even so, he was highly capable in his work, and since he was from Dowager Empress Zhou's birth family, she and Chenghua were quite fond of him. They saw him as someone efficient that didn't use his status as consortkin to misbehave, being far and above better than those other consortkins of idle contributions. The Empress Dowager thus loved to tell everyone she came across, "Look at how good our Zhou is." Chenghua had even compared him to the elder brother of the Yingzhou court's Dowager Sun Jizong. Who was Sun Jizong? He was the #1 consortkin of this court and that of the previous one, successively gaining the trust of both emperors. He had gotten on a horse, presided over the army, helped Yingzhou to go back to his position, then helped him take charge of the embellishment of history books. To what degree was this emperor's confidence in him? He had handed military power over to him, not allowing him to retire even if he wanted to, and whenever a major discussion happened in court, it had to be headed by him. A few years back, when the Grand Tutor title had just been added to him and the civil officials had denounced him, saying that consortkin shouldn't hold military power, the emperor had ignored them. A consortkin being in the position he was really made other people envious and hateful. Regardless of whether Suizhou was actually another Sun Jizong, this was nothing more than the Son of Heaven noticing a favorite of his old mother and who he intentionally complimented to make her happy. Still, with an evaluation like that, Suizhou's status had stood out from the crowd thereafter. He himself was unwilling to use his connections to get ahead, presently being a mere Behu in the Jinyue. However, supposing that he had the time, he might be able to go up in the world quickly. Finding people with status was easy and finding people with skill was easy, but finding someone with both, that was challenging. Therefore, even though Wang Zhi was powerful and had the favor of both the emperor and the consort, he had to reluctantly rein in his pride in the face of such a man, cupping his hands towards Suizhou in return. "Who do I think I am? Turns out the host is already here. Please don't take offense to those rash comments of mine." His tone was casual, as if he wasn't actually asking for forgiveness at all. Suizhou wasn't going to bother with him. "You're too polite, eunuch Wang." After that, they suddenly said nothing else, sizing each other up. One was wondering why the other had come. The other was pondering what was this man's relationship with Tang Fan. At first glance, they resembled two martial arts experts that had met face to face on a narrow path and were preparing to cross swords. End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 43. Getting teased. Yet against all odds, the tense atmosphere that had appeared to be going to be volatile dissipated in an instant. The subordinate following eunuch Wang didn't dare to disturb his superior's staring match, but young Dong had no such qualms. She came out of Tang Fan's room with bowl and chopsticks in hand. "Why are you standing there and not going in?" she called out in bewilderment upon witnessing the scenario. Only then did eunuch Wang wipe off the non-existent dust on his clothes, curve his lips into an undecipherable smile towards Suizhou, then passed by him to head inside. Seeing that Suizhou wasn't following him, Dong was slightly confused. "Aren't you going to go in, brother Sui? Who's that guy? Why was he so imperial?" Suizhou shook his head and said nothing. Giving the Western Depot warden standing outside a look, then he turned and left. They would talk more inside the room. Any man who typically looked stylish and pretty would not be able to maintain such appearance if they were sick. Master Tang was, of course, no exception. He was currently using a handkerchief to cover his nose while he sneezed, blowing it clean as he was at it. Noticing that eunuch Wang was standing 3 chi away from him with a look of disgust, he had to say, "You've graced us with your presence, eunuch Wang. Why have you come?" His voice had a thick nasally sound to it and his eyes were slightly red. His fair, jade-like skin contrasted with the disheveled hair near his face, but such a look on him seemed to give off a sense of frail beauty. Which would have been the case, if Wang Zhi hadn't just witnessed him sneeze and blow his nose. Eunuch Wang suddenly bolted to the room where Tang Fan was, then mysteriously shut the door like he was the host and not the guest, effectively shutting said family's host out. He hadn't come to merely pay him a visit, naturally. "Have you not heard the words in the court?" he answered after Tang Fan's question. "I've been sick these couple of days and have been resting at home. There were 12 shishans in one day and I'm sleeping for 8 or 9 out of them, at the bare minimum. Where would I find the free time to go and ask about any news? What's happened?" Wang Zhi curled his lip. "I petitioned for reclaiming the Ben to His Majesty, but like you predicted, it was rejected." Tang Fan nodded. There was no surprise on his face. Wang Zhi was a bit put off. He was young and had been in charge of the Western Depot these 2 years, having much more tremendous insight from his experiences outside the palace. When it came to having an analytical mind concerning court matters, he didn't fall short of Tang Fan. However, even if he had the thought to get military merits and head off troops, his military knowledge was only average. He dragged a chair over to the side of the door, then sat down. "What's the trick to this? Tell me. How were you so certain that His Majesty wouldn't approve of the reclamation petition? Could you not sit so far away? I only caught a cold, not the plague. Tang Fan looked at him, a bit dumbfounded. Everyone knows that the Great Bend is an important location. Everyone also knows that the area was easy to attain but difficult to defend. Even if the Ming Empire snatches it, it's foreordained to be hard to keep. The court won't be willing to expend that much effort in taking a piece of land that could be snatched away by anyone at any time. Once they figure the costs out, they'll feel that the gains aren't worth the losses. That's one reason. Another is that even though we have the military forces, we don't have the morale. The country as it is now is not the country as it was before the Tuma crisis. Take a look at the society at large, who would bring up reclamation of their own accord. Even the emperor himself is likely thinking that the less complications there are, the better. It's only natural that your act has hit a wall, eunuch Wang. Wang Ji frowned. But you suggested before that I go north. Now that reclamation can't happen, what merits could it hold? It isn't that the bend can't be claimed back but rather, it can't be taken back in a short time, Tang Fan answered, voice low. It would be a massive battle. It needs the right time, the right place and the right people in order for victory to be assured. Now that not even 1 out of every 3 people are in cooperation, how can discussion over the bend be had? Your aim for recovering territory on behalf of the nation is admirable, but this is a dish that needs to be eaten bite by bite. War is the same. The north situation is ever changing as the Warais and Tartars kept swinging between strong and weak, but what never changes is that the Great Ming's north is always getting menaced. Yongle had shifted the capital to Beijing so that emperors of subsequent generations could go on alert instantly as they faced the northern barbarians, thus keeping the northern border safe. What he didn't say was that it was a boon that the capital was now Beijing and not Nanjing. If it weren't, then according to the current emperor's disposition, he would have been happily whiling his time about in the south while the north got its doors opened wide and land invaded countless times by the Warais and Tartars. Now, there would always be a sense of crisis when it came to Beijing's safety, because it absolutely couldn't be lost. Therefore, even if reclaiming the bend is important, it's not the only thing that must be done, he continued. You must know that ever since the Tuma crisis, our side has lost more confrontations and won less, weakening our morale. Following the Warais wane of power, the Tartars had sprung up. Many think that if we can't win no matter what, we may as well hole up and not go out. Then, if things get bad, we'll bribe the Tartars with treasures and money, or just let them go into cities and plunder them for a spell, because once they've stolen enough and their hearts are content, they'll naturally leave. If you can defeat the Tartars bad enough that they would become scared of harassing our borders constantly, then you can take merit from that. The Ming Empire was big, but it was precisely because of that fact that its troop couldn't be mobilized casually and was a conspicuous target. The nomadic race of Tartars, despite their small-scale attacks, would simply leave after they were done pillaging. They didn't dare to come when the strong were around, so they encroached when the border security was weak, never remaining stationed in any border city. The enemy was in the dark but the Great Ming was in the light, making this quite difficult to manage. That was why the country never had a way to deal with those people. They were like a bunch of black flies buzzing all about that would scatter with one swat. After some time had passed, the Great Ming would still be standing there, a giant target, while the flies could come and find it at any time. How was that to be dealt with? The only way it could be was to be so completely formidable that the flies would never dare to approach when they see the giant target. But if the Great Ming wanted to get strong, those good-for-nothing major officials in court needed to be switched out first. Then, if possible, the emperor also needed his brain washed so that he wouldn't waste so much of his life away. Therefore, if Wang Ji wanted to regain the bend, it would be practically impossible for him to do so without wrangling those key figures. Wang Ji had been excitedly wanting to get the watermelon and eat it, too, only for Tang Fan to inform him that it wasn't ripe yet, so he could only eat grapes. His interest immediately vanished. Seeing that he wasn't fond of little fights, Tang Fan was a bit helpless. Eunuch Wang, forgive my bluntness, but if the Great Bend was so easy to recover, Yang Il would have long taken it back with how wise and strategic he was. Why would it be our turn to do it now? Would victory against the Tartars not be a major credit? Moreover, doesn't the empire not have the money to support you in reclaiming the Bend in the first place? Wang Ji stood up. Forget it. I don't want to stay in the capital and fight with Shangming all day long over this tiny piece of land. How trying. I want to do something big. That's the only way I won't have walked this world in vain. People who walk away when the tea gets cold dread slander the most, Tang Fan warned. Before you have the time to return, His Majesty and the consort would have already forgotten you. In his view, Wang Ji had many shortcomings, but in comparison to the others, he was a lot better if a choice had to be made. He ultimately had a view of the big picture, unlike Shangming's sort of eunuch that only knew how to eradicate dissidents and fawn on the emperor. No matter what his motives were, in light of him helping to keep Yuan Liang a secret and thus sparing the crowned prince scrutiny from consort Wan, he was much better than several officials in the court. This was the reason Tang Fan was willing to associate with him and allowed him to pick his brains. Wang Ji waved him off. I understand that. Then, he got skeptical. That said though, you're young and your post is minor. How do you know the state of the northern border so well? Scholars can learn of the world without ever leaving their homes, but there's not many people like you in the court. I think Pan Ben wouldn't even be able to say what you did, despite being an official for so many years. Tang Fan smiled. How can scholars that never leave their homes learn of the world? Back when my parents died early, I took my recently gained county honorates achievement to travel as I studied, going from Yunnan in the south to the Gobi in the north. I read a great number of books and traveled a great number of li, a footprint for my every step as I went. Wang Ji was slightly moved as he listened, genuinely looking at him in a new light. In this time period, transportation was extremely arduous. Tang Fan was no frail woman, but he would have traveled alone. Regardless of how peaceful a golden age was, there would forever be robbing bandits and obstructing troops on the road. Unfathomable disasters of all sorts would happen, and if he got a fever from chill, treatment and medicine would be lacking, while finding any kind of doctor out in the middle of nowhere wouldn't be happening. Also, ever since Zhengtong's time, riots had cropped up time and time again. If a scholar with no martial arts knowledge like Tang Fan got accidentally swept up in something, the rioters would probably just kill him, ignoring what side he was on. Yet, he had not died. He was alive and well, even passing the exams to become a palace honorates and then an official. With all the hazards and risks he had encountered through it, he had somehow turned that danger around into security. All it needed to do was be written out and it would become a marvelous tale. An official like this and an official that only knew how to read themselves to death to become an official who would only whittle his days away in his post, could not be spoken of in the same breath. In this world, those that withstood hardships might not all be destined for greatness, but without exception, all of those who became great had to have experienced hardships. Eunuch Wang had already been feeling that Tang Fan wasn't much like the rest. Now, he was even more certain that he was going to accrue further investment in the latter. Whether said investment was political or emotional, having a good relationship with this man would definitely be an advantage to him in the future. With their talk about official matters done, Wang Ji prepared to get up and take his leave. In a jovial mood, he smiled ambiguously towards Tang Fan. I've noticed that you normally present yourself as being free-spirited, but not to the point that you're idling life by. How did you get sick? Since you've got a grown man and little girl attending to you, do you want me to send you a few pretty maidservants? No, thank you. Wine is a poison to the viscera, lust is a blade to the bones. I'm afraid that my bones will get slashed to pieces before I've recovered from the cold. Though since you're offering and if you're willing, there's something you can do for me. What is it? Tang Fan was kind of embarrassed. Well, you see, I've been sick at home these past couple of days and can't even go out the door. I heard that a bunch of new books have come out in the bookstores recently. I really can't trouble Suijo or a little girl with going out and buying these trifles for me, so I'd like to ask you to buy a couple books and send them my way. Being ill is boring, so they would be good for killing time. Wang Ji was suspicious. What kind of books? They're not erotic ones, right? Tang Fan nearly choked. Do I look like somebody that would be so indecent? Wang Ji didn't even need to think about his answer. No. The other seemed relieved. But looks can be deceiving. Tang Fan became unhappy as he exclaimed, not erotic books, romantic stories. Written with supernatural stuff and unique narrative. Will you bring those or not? Wang Ji smirked. I will. Since you've helped me so much, how could I not lend you a hand for such a little thing? At some unknown point in time, he had stepped forward and now used a hand to raise Tang Fan's chin, looking him left and right. Speaking of it, you're a bit of a looker. If you stop being an official someday and go sell romance novels in town, I reckon that your business would be successful with all sorts of women as your patronage. Mr. Tang finally couldn't help but roll his eyes gracelessly. If that day actually comes, I'll go and sell them at the Western Depot's gate. As soon as he said that, they heard the door being pushed open with a creak. Suijo walked in with medicine, just in time to see Wang Ji leaning over with his hand on Tang Fan's chin. The latter had to tilt his head slightly back, but his body was still reclined on the bed and wrapped in a blanket. Due to his coughing, 2 rosy blushes suffused the cool white of his complexion, his hair messy and his clothes disheveled. The distance between them was so close that upon seeing this scene, one would not to be able to help but have weird thoughts. It was also worth mentioning that the great Ming's eunuchs weren't as effeminate as many people like to imagine they were. There was no lack of tall, powerful, masculine characters amongst them, and if it weren't for their inability to grow beards, no one would ever find them out. Chief Eunuch Wang didn't look powerful but instead veered to softness, but his physique had nothing to do with the words weak, frail, and thin. Think about it, would someone who had practiced martial arts since childhood just like Suijo had, be in any way slim? In contrast, because Master Tang was both a civil official and currently ill, one glance was telling that he was not strong enough. No matter how one looked at this, they would think that Eunuch Wang's lustful heart had emerged and he was now bullying Tang Fan. Under Suijo's cold and silent gaze, Wang Ji graciously let go of Tang Fan's chin, then lightly pat him on the cheek. I'll come see you another day. Get well soon, he said, as if he was being affectionate. Tang Fan. Why did he feel like those words could cause a misunderstanding? In the face of Suijo's frigid and imposing aura, Wang Ji acted like he didn't see it. General Sui Beihu is highly virtuous to both bring him medicine and care for him. If things keep going down like this, Master Tang won't even need to take a wife in the future. Not waiting for Tang Fan's reaction, Wang Ji laughed and strolled right out of his own accord. What he had said was very blatant, 100% brash and extremely arbitrary. If anyone else today had been teased like a woman, or been a big, magnificent man getting compared to a little wife, some grudges would be held. Thankfully, Tang Fan didn't take it seriously and Suijo was disinclined to bicker with him, thus allowing the director of the Western Depot to freely leave. The unlucky one was Master Tang, who as soon as Wang Ji left, got scolded. Wang Ji's moods tend to fluctuate and it's hard for him to distinguish between good and evil, Suijo said to him, face cold. Being friends with him isn't worth it. Tang Fan agreed with his evaluation of Wang Ji but still had to say something. His Majesty favors eunuchs right now and that situation is difficult to change. Ones that conduct themselves rigorously like Huaiyan are ultimately a minority, as His Majesty prefers ones like Liang Feng, Wang Ji, and Shang Ming, who will pander to his desires. Even if it wasn't Wang Ji doing it, it would be a Li Ji or a Zhang Ji. As long as I can somewhat guide him into walking a proper path or doing something that benefits the country and its people, it's a gain. Seeing that he knew what was up, Suizhou said no more, putting the medicine in front of him. Tang Fan. He smiled beseechingly. Look, can we talk this over? I'm much better now. We can skip on the medicine, right? He said that he was much better, but in reality, he was still sniffling. Unperturbed, Suizhou said only one thing, will you drink it yourself or will I have to feed it to you? Giving no more objection, Tang Fan took the bowl, pinched his nose, then jugged the stuff down. His face scrunched up into a ball. He even weakly waved away the Osman thus candy that Suizhou had brought to him, completely uninterested. Food lovers love to eat, but that definitely didn't extend to bitter medicine. Right as they were chatting idly, someone was heard to be calling at the gate outside. Suizhou got up and went out. It had to be said that Suizhou's 3-courtyard residence really wasn't that small, but its total permanent population amounted to him, Tang Fan, Dong and no one else. Day workers would get hired to clean the house, and they had their own dwellings in the capital that they would return to after they were done, not even standing by on this place. There was no doorman or steward present, with the entrance gate needing to be opened by the hosts themselves. However, this arrangement gave a freeing sensation. People like Suizhou and Tang Fan didn't like to be constrained, so it was logical that they also wouldn't like seeing people they weren't close to moving about right under their noses all day long. After Suizhou left, he didn't come back. While Tang Fan was wondering why, he saw Dong sneakily walked her way in. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Would I not let you in here or something? Why are you acting like that? She giggled. Brother Sui's cousin dropped by again. Master Tang was a grown man of typically laid-back and casual personality. He had no grudge with young Miss Zhou, so he didn't really find her unpleasant. The cause of his little temper that one day was simply due to unpleasant conclusion of the East Palace case, where someone died who shouldn't have, and then after coming back, he witnessed Dong and Suizhou having an affectionate talk and laughing with cousin Zhou. It had been hard to avoid having a melancholic feeling like he was going through life in solitude. It had to be said that there was, in fact, no affectionate talking and laughing at all. That had purely been Master Tang's one-sided, subjective opinion. Things had long since changed with time. He was, of course, not actually going to be like a tiny, jealous child throwing a tantrum, to the point that he would stop his friend from getting close to this Zhou lady or anything like that. Thus, upon hearing what Dong said, he smiled lazily. Dong, are you jealous that someone else is getting close to your brother Sui? Since you're still so young, your big brother should make decisions for you. If you like Suizhou, you have to wait for a few years until you've grown up a bit. Then I'll bring it up to him, see if he's willing to take you as a concubine. You're such a little bean sprout right now, though, that it's no use just mumbling to me about it here. Dong was always naive and lively, but she had still been the maid of a rich family. It was impossible for her to be completely ignorant of inner household affairs. As soon as she heard him say that, she pounced forward to beat him up, loudly and verbally complaining to him as she did so. What are you even talking about? I'm not jealous of Sister Zhou. I'm worried about you. What are you worrying about me for? He asked, mystified. Think about it. If Brother Sui actually does marry her, what will you do? Tang Fan, a usually very smart man, was totally dumbstruck. What do you mean, what will I do? The more you talk, the less sense you make. She side-eyed him. Did you get dumb in your illness? If they get married, won't she inevitably come live here? How would we be able to stay here then? We would have to move, right? So, of course I'm concerned. You don't earn big, either, which is why I hope that we can live here for as long as we can, so that you'll save up more money. In spite of her youth, she was able to add up the bills, as well as explain things clearly and methodically. Am I so useless, in your eyes?" he asked sullenly. "Are we going to get battered by wind and rain if we move?" "Won't we be," she answered sadly. "Your salary is so low and you like to eat so much. You eat so many things every single day, you would have eaten yourself poor. What will you do then? I measure out the rice and noodles you buy for me each month carefully, we grow our own fruit in the garden and a small bit of meat is bought after all that, giving you a couple monthly silvers that you can save for when you get a wife. If we move out, I'm afraid that you won't be able to save even that up. What can you do, then?" Hearing that emotional tirade, he really wanted to roll his eyes, both angry and touched. All that pomp, yet the girl had actually been invested in the other two because of this. He patted her on the head. "Take your heart out of your stomach, all right," he said, voice rough. "We'll never end up wandering the streets. Besides, even if I do, are you going to stop seeing me as your big brother?" She shook her head fiercely. "Then that's that, isn't it? If I get a bite of food, you'll get a bite of food. In any case, you shouldn't underestimate our old Tang family. Before my parents died, we were prestigious in Shaoxing, and they left lots of good stuff behind even after the family decline. Should there came a time that we take 10,000 steps back and can't go on anymore, I still have my older sister's family in Xianghe County that we can go seek refuge with." He was just randomly comforting her, though. His big sister marrying off meant that she was now part of her husband's family, while Tang Fan was in the capital being an official. Why would he ever run off to go stay with her? It made the girl grin widely anyways. "All right then, Gig. I won't scold you for eating a lot anymore. It'd be better if you ate some more, actually. Once this illness is over, you won't have any meat on your bones. Anyone who didn't know would think you were a refugee." He went to pinch her on the face. "If you keep talking crap like that, there won't be a need to wait for your brother Sui to get a wife. I'll just straight up kick you out." While they mucked around, a voice unexpectedly came from the door. "Who's getting a wife?" Looking towards the sound, they saw that Sui Zhou had come just in time to hear the latter half of that sentence. He was followed by Miss Zhou and her maid. "My cousin heard that you were sick," he said. "Recalling that day that she had run into you, she specifically asked me to bring her over to see you and apologize. There were huge conventions that must be observed between men and women, but they were not so harsh that there was no leeway to be had. For instance, Tang Fan was Sui Zhou's friend. He was already introduced to Sui Zhou's family and was currently staying in the same place as him, so there was nothing stopping Miss Zhou from meeting him. Comparatively speaking, were this the South, Confucian morals and decorum would be a bit stricter, but the North was a little more lenient with them." Miss Zhou's sharpness from before was nowhere to be seen. She looked rather bashful before her cousin. Anyone not blind could see what intentions she had for him. Only the one in question remained placid-faced, the degree to which he was aware of them were unknown. Tang Fan smiled. "You're too polite, Miss Zhou. That had just been a misunderstanding brought about by not knowing each other's identities. Now that it has been resolved, everything is fine. However, I've come down with a cold right now, out of fear that it will get passed to you. Please don't stay for long." Zhou Ziyu nodded, then said a few more pleasantries. She was evidently not too comfortable with the medicinal smell in the room, since she never took a seat, merely standing at the doorway as she also said a greeting to Adong, after which she took her leave. As the host, Sui Zhou naturally had to be the one that saw the guests off. While they walked towards the gate, Zhou Ziyu spoke up with a slight bit of coquettishness. "Winter is about to come, cousin. On a day when the weather is a bit better, how about you come with me to Yunji Temple to burn incense?" Sui Zhou was a bit cold but irresistibly tall and soldierly. Both exceptional looking and remarkably talented, his prospects for the future were bright, and the Sui family got a lot of matchmakers coming by their door with marriage proposals. However, his parents had never been the masters of their youngest son, and there had also been a verbal engagement made between the Sui and Zhou families, so this had gotten shelved. His maternal uncle from the Zhou side had brought his family for a little trip to the capital. One reason for this was to care for his elderly mother, and another was to secure marriages for his children. In truth, Xiaoyu's father had already picked out another candidate for her. That man's father had a post in Imperial Hanlin Academy while he, himself, studied in the Imperial College. They could be described as a family of literary repute, which was way different from Sui Zhou's military sort. Ever since the Zhou family debuted because of the Empress Dowager's fortune, they had consciously been wanting to get closer to literary and official families so that their people could rise higher in status. That his uncle would make his choices based on that was normal. Of course, in Sui Zhou's own opinion, this might get his cousin to stop insisting. The friendship between them had stopped at their childhood, and after being separated for many years, there had never been such melodramatic events of undying love declarations, or oaths to not marry anyone else. Still, Zhou Xiaoyu seemed to have been keeping such sentiments for him. These repeated visits had only been to probe out how he was going to react about it. What a shame that their thoughts were not on the same line. With difficulty, she invited him over, but he shook his head. No. Tang Fan has been sick and Dong can't do everything alone. I need to be at home to watch over things. She bit her lip. How about I find a maid or servant to come and help, then? Leave it be. Don't trouble yourself so much, he answered mildly. Just go with uncle and the rest. I heard that he intends to seek out a marriage for you, so the groom's qualities are bound to be high. We may be cousins, but men and women should observe proper decorum. It would be best if you visit less so that people won't gossip. Her face quickly reddened with embarrassment. She gave him a fierce glare, then threw out one sentence, "You're really awful." She then turned around and walked out in a fury. The Zhou maidservant had been following after them, then had tacitly moved a distance away when they seemed to be having a private conversation. Upon seeing her mistress inexplicably get angry, brush her sleeves out and leave, she hastily ran after her in bafflement. Watching them go far off, Sui Zhou's expression didn't change much. He went back to Tang Fan's room. With the medicine having since taken effect, Tang Fan was deeply asleep. Gig hasn't been sleeping for long, Dong whispered. What do you want to eat for dinner, brother Sui? I'll go cook it. Do as you like. Just heat up some leftover congee for later. These several days had been busy with caring for the sick one, and the sick one couldn't eat too much fancy stuff. Dong didn't feel like messing around either, so she headed out with a confirmation. Once she left, only the two remained in the room. One asleep, one awake. One laying, one standing. Tang Fan had been asleep longer than he had been awake recently. Illnesses came like collapsing mountains, then went like spun silk. The inside of the room was very quiet, with only the sound of Tang Fan's elongated breaths linking together could be heard. Sui Zhou covered him up with the blanket properly, then stood there silently for a minute. It wasn't until Dong knocked on the door and called for him to eat that he turned to leave. End chapter.